Hello, my name is Carl Surrey, and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. And this would be a beginner's guide part 7, looking at the PhotoFix Studio. Now the icon for the PhotoFix Studio is up here along this bar that runs just under the various menus. Currently it is blanked out and can't be accessed because I do not have a picture open. But before I actually start looking at that, I just want to sort of reference a video which I did a couple of days ago, which was looking at how to use the Import RAW Studio, so you could process RAW files. And I just want to quickly go pick a RAW file, which is going to be this image 3594.cr2, which is the RAW file version of this one here, which is image 3594.jpg. So if I right click on that and open in Serif, and if you've watched that video, you'll remember that this is the Input RAW dialog box. Let me just increase that size, which has all your presets and all the other things that are mentioned in that video. So I will just close this down. I just want to remember what that looked like. And I will go back and open the JPEG version of the same image, and as it's a JPG file, it will open automatically into PhotoPlus and not into a separate tool like the Import RAW files do. But now that I have an image open, the PhotoFix button is now highlighted and can be accessed. So if I click on this, it will open, which I can reduce the size so you can see that PhotoPlus is still underneath, but I will increase its size again. But as you can see, this is identical to the Input RAW panel in that you have all the presets down the left hand side, so you could change this to look like an old photo or black and white etching. So for more details, you can look at the Input RAW video, and that will explain how all these different presets work. But just quickly pick one at random, color fade. Now whatever one you pick, the options that Serif have used will be highlighted on the right here by a little black dot in whichever tool they have used. So if I expand the Unsharp Mask tool, they've raised it to 96%. Right, to get back to a default setting, I'll put it onto daylight, which I think, if I remember rightly, was the white balance that I used on that day. I'll turn off and reset all the tools that Serif had used to make the one that I picked here on the left. So this should be now back to where the original image is, and it's still underneath. So this is really a sort of a beginner's guide, not so much guide, a beginner's tool for editing pictures that are JPG rather than RAW. Because if I reduce this in size again and move it off screen, if you as a more advanced user of photo editing programs, you wouldn't necessarily use this tool. You'd be making your own layers and editing a file that way. But if you're quite new to photo editing, the PhotoFix Studio is quite an easy way to start. I'll just raise this in size again, because Serif have sort of set it up in a way that most of the main used adjustments are already there set up for you, but they are not actually in use at the start. So the image is exactly how you took the picture, and you, much like the Input RAW Studio, when one of these squares has a little black dot in it, that means that that control or tool has been altered in some way. They can be expanded and closed again by these little arrows, and the blue arrows on the right will reset back to the original. So the first thing, much like I did in the RAW video, first thing I would do is correct this horizon, because as you can see it slopes down quite dramatically. So up along the top here, again, much like the Input RAW Studio, you have these various options where you have the pan tool, which means when you zoomed in you can scroll the picture around, red eye tool, spot repair tool, clone tool. This is the one I'm going to use to change the straightness of the horizon, but I'll come back to it in a minute. You've got the undo and redo tool. This one is the where you can split the screen in half to see where you started and where you ended up. The zoom in and out tool. The zoom to a selected area, so you could zoom, let's select it first. You can just select an area and it will zoom in to that area. So if you've got the pan tool selected, you can scroll around and have a look. Maybe zoom out again. The create mask tool, I will be having a quick look at that. I didn't look at that in the Input RAW Studio video because I didn't really know too much about it, but I've had a quick tinker with it, and I will have a very brief look at that. And the gradient mask tool. This was a tool that kept crashing my program while I was using the Input RAW Studio, and I'm hoping it won't do the same again with the PhotoFix Studio. So I'm going to go back to this crop and straighten tool. I'll click on that, and down the right here you have the sort of instructions on how to crop an image and straighten an image, and on the screen there are some preset grid lines. So as you can see, the horizon is well below that grid line on the left, well above I mean, and well below on the right. So I'm going to come just outside of the image, and the cursor will turn to this two-ended arrow, and you can just click and hold, and now you get many more grid lines on the screen. And I'm just going to twist it around till it is fairly straight, not more. Get in there. It's gone too far now. That's a bit better. And I will just drag the bottom of this crop line up so the horizon is level with this line here. So I would have hit it. Oh, there we go. And I will just bring this left-handed one in slightly so that the end of this breakwater comes down the right hand vertical line. So when I'm happy with that, I'll just click accept and it will be cropped to the settings that I've put it at. There is still a slight bowing of the horizon, not as bad as it was, but that's more of a problem with probably not just my camera, but cameras in general. Looking at the horizon, it can sort of bow like that. Right, so now moving on to starting to edit. Now again, like when I was using the input raw studio, you can first thing I'll try and do is change the white balance if necessary, because if you was indoors shot, you could change it from fluorescent or tungsten depending on the light bulbs that you were working under. But if it was an outdoor picture, it would just change it to blue. Shade and cloudy options make the image warmer. So it's a lot of it depends on what you are looking for. Now, probably, especially with JPG files, it probably would have been better to have got the white balance correct while at the point of shooting, because there's less pixels in a JPG file for you to work with. But I'm going to leave it on shade to make it look a bit more sunnier than it was on the actual day. And then I'm going to alter some of the lighting settings. The bottom three are the shadows, highlights and black points, which is a bit like the levels tool, in that you can, on the levels tool at this end would be the shadows or blacks, on that side, on the right hand side, it would be the highlights or whites, and then the midtones pointer would be in the middle, and that is what I think the black point slider alters here. So as you can see from this histogram up here, there's quite a lot of pixels on the dark side of the image, but there's not so much on the white end of the spectrum. Most of those white pixels, I would imagine, are over here in the sky. And because I'm going to lower the highlights a bit, that will probably make even less pixels on the right hand side. Yes, you can see it's starting to bunch up this histogram even more over to the right. So I will bring up some of the shadows, which should help push this back a bit the other way, hopefully. So now we have a brighter image. I'm just going to alter the contrasts because it looks a bit flat at the moment. There's not very many, in fact there are now no perfect blacks, so there's no real blacks in this image. So I'll alter the contrast towards the left, which will make some of those dark areas a bit blacker. Go a little bit more than that. I can also lower the brightness slightly, and maybe the exposure as well. So as you can see from this histogram, I mean, I've now got no real blacks or real whites really. So I might bring the highlights back a little bit. And the same goes for the shadows. It's bits like any of these other tools, whether you use the input raw studio or whether you use layers in the normal version. You can continue to keep tinkering with the settings until you're happy with the image, until you press the OK. Once you press the OK button, it will then return you to PhotoPlus. So I'm now going to have a look at the Hue Saturation slider. So I'm going to boost the saturation a bit. And what I'll also do is, I think I'll go to the cyan channel, and I'll boost some of the saturation of the cyan channel to try and bring back some of the blueness in the sky, which has now ruined that part of the sky up there. So I'm going to have to come back a bit, and let's try the blue channel and boost that instead. I'll go back and drop that cyan down a bit more, because it was still slightly ruining that corner up there. So hopefully the sky and the sea look a bit bluer, whereas the sand and the clouds over here are looking a bit more orange and warmer. This may not be how you would want to edit this picture, but this is what I'm going for. I'm going to also where was it I was going to go? I've forgotten that. Oh, the curves tool. Yes, I'm going to just alter the shadows and highlights a little bit more using the curves tool. I've put two handles on this line, and I'm going to drag the bottom one down, which is the shadows, make that a little bit darker, and the top one is the highlights. Well, it's on the right hand side of this screen, so it's the highlights. And just push them up again a little bit. Yes, I think I quite like that. So if I click on the split screen option, that is where I started out, and this is now where I am now, and you can move this line so you can see the difference between where we were and where we are now. I'll go back to the global view. Now this next one I'm going to have a look at, which I didn't look at when I did the raw studio, is the create mask. Now it's a bit like creating a layer mask in the normal version part of PhotoPlus. If you want to click on that, it gives you this sort of button with two round circles on it. You can increase the size of that. If you have a wheel mouse, if you use the wheel, it will increase the size. I've not actually worked out whether there is a keyboard option for increasing and lowering the size. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and make it so I want to change just this sand on this side of the breakwater, because it is much darker than that side. So I'm just going to click once, and then around the area I want to get. And if I had made it slightly bigger, I may have got more of the beach on that side selected, but I don't want to select too much of the breakwater itself. Right, I'll leave it. I don't think I like that last one. I'll just undo that last one and possibly undo that one as well. It looks a bit silly, and that might be better. So now this green area, well, it should disappear after a while, but the mask is still active, as you can see by this option up here. So you can feather the mask, which just means it will sort of slowly disintegrate or fade, which is what you do want a bit of feather, so I'll just increase that a little bit. But what I want to do is to increase the saturation to make it a bit more orange. So if I just increase that, as you can see, I'm not affecting anything in this part of the image, just that side. Let's have a try at the brightness. That's a bit too far, just come back slightly. Yeah, I think that's not too bad. It's that side of the breakwater is now a bit brighter and a bit warmer. So if you come back up here to the top where it says filters, mask, if you click on this arrow and go back to global, you could then continue to make alterations, and it will be to the whole picture, which would include this beach as well. Or you could go back to altering the mask by selecting the mask. Or if you wanted to do something different to this side of the beach, for example, you could make another mask by coming down to new, and then you'd have all these set back to 0 or their default settings, and you could make alterations to another part of the image. Now that was something I didn't touch on in the input raw video because I'd never actually used it. Now I am going to chicken out in using the gradient mask because it kept crashing my program before, and it took me a long time to get it to work sufficiently to show how it worked. But basically it will draw three lines on the image, and one half of the image that between those lines will be affected by the alterations you make, and the other half wouldn't. So you could set it up so the lines were on the horizon, for example, the middle line, and have the alterations made to the sky or to the beach, depending on which way round you have it set. I would advise you to have a look at the video for the how to raw process and see how that works much better. So all you've got to do now is click OK. It will return the image back to PhotoPlus, and it will make all the alterations that you've just made using the PhotoFix Studio without having to use layers one at a time like you would do when you become much more advanced in your use of PhotoPlus. then all you need to do is to go up to File and then Save As or Export, depending on how you prefer to save your images. I prefer to use Export. I find it personally, for my personal use, much better. And then just set it to JPG, and then you just find somewhere to save it as you would normally, and then change the name. Always best to change the name of any image that you alter, so that you've always got the original to go back to. Right, I'll just cancel that and go back to this image, and I'm hoping you think that that is better than the original version that I started with. Hopefully that has helped you. Thank you and goodbye.